Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth Podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now. Hello, everybody. I'm Thane Stenner, your host of the BNN Bloomberg Smart Wealth Podcast, and also founder of Stenner Wealth Partners here at CG Wealth Management. Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast. This should be, in my opinion, a really insightful interview with my special guest, Franco Lombardo. Franco, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
You're absolutely welcome. And I think you're based in Hamilton, Bermuda, correct?
That is correct. Just outside of Hamilton, a little place called Flats Village.
Ah, fantastic. How long have you lived there, by the way?
Moved here in July of 2021. So what's that, 3 years and a bit?
Yes, and I think you were out in our neck of the woods here in Vancouver for a while, were you not?
I was in Vancouver for, 25, 26 years, something like that.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
listen, I'm sure you're enjoying some sunshine. We have a beautiful day here in Vancouver as well. But again, thanks so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us here today. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a bio on Franco or Francesco. So let me just do that over the next few minutes, and then we'll kind of launch right into some Q&A with our special guest. For more than 20 years now, Franco Lombardo has been a family business advisor and facilitator to some of the world's most diverse and wealthiest families. He set up his firm, Veritage, his global advisory firm that exclusively focuses on building relational governance, which you'll learn more about here during this session. Franco uses his trademarked safe space model to empower families to show up authentically and to express their feelings surrounding money and relationships. We all know that there can be a lot of emotions and feelings around money and relationships these days. He's passionate about nurturing the next generation of family-owned businesses. Franco is also the co-creator and one of the leading facilitators of two projects called the Scone Project and the Masai Project, which I'm sure Franco will kind of share with us a little bit more about those today. Both of them are interactive next-generation leadership development programs for business families. Because at the end of the day, business families and entrepreneurs and patriarchs, matriarchs of families want to try to see very smooth transitions within their family businesses. As founder and host of Influence, which is a gathering of the globe's highest net worth families representing their family businesses, Franco also facilitates a custom curated program designed to deepen family relationships. He's also the author of 5 books, which I'm sure Franco will share with us here today. And he also hosts a podcast called Safe Space with Francesco Lombardo, which is basically a show around family business leaders and next gen. Franco has delivered presentations for the Milken Institute, which is extremely highly regarded, Camden Wealth and Family Business Conferences, Institutional Investor, Tiger 21, of which I'm the chairman emeritus of, and various YPO, WPO global chapters. He's also been featured in the award-winning Spears magazine and was described as the truth agent by CEO magazine, which I think hopefully he'll also share more about that. More recently, Franco was inducted into the United Family Business Hall of Fame, which recognizes the exceptional contribution of individuals and professionals and their work in advancing the field of family business. So once again, Marco, thank you very much for being here today. And if it's okay with you, we can kind of launch right into the questions.
Let's go.
All right. So you're the founder of Veritage International, a coaching firm for wealth owning families. Can you share a little bit more about what led you to this work over the last 20 years in regards to the relational, emotional, and behavioral dynamics of these families?
Yeah. So, I, like you, was in wealth management and did that for almost 20 years, and I was good at it. And it just wasn't my jam. I got bored. I was more fascinated by the emotional side of wealth than the actual management of it. And I remember at one point, being quite financially successful at it and making a lot of money, and realized that I was becoming a version of myself I didn't like. I was very self-centered, very arrogant, very, hey, chauvinistic, look at me, look at my grandiosity. And I thought to myself, something doesn't feel right here. I'm financially successful, but I'm not feeling fulfilled emotionally. So I went and hired a coach to help me understand why that was. And he was helping me to uncover and help me understand what events happened in my childhood that led to my needing to seek significance in such a unhealthy way. So I realized I was more geared to, more fascinated by why human beings, the way they behave with money, than the actual management of their money or wealth.
So, so that really generated or kind of triggered you to kind of go into a different direction in your career. And for those that are unfamiliar with the term emotional governance, can you explain what that means and what that looks like in practical terms? What does success look like if you're emotionally governing
Yeah.
wealth in your family?
So, as I was managing money for very wealthy families and individuals, I started to realize a trend that even though they had large financial wealth, the family members themselves didn't feel emotionally safe with each other. You see, human beings have a misunderstanding that financial security will create emotional security. And it actually does the quite opposite. So the industry, by that I mean families of wealth, advisors of any kind, believe that if they have traditional governance in place to govern the business and operations, that will address the behavioral issues within the family members. Right? So, for example, we have governance in society. Like we have a little sign that's got 8 sides to it, and it's red, it's got some white lettering in the middle, it says stop. Yet many of us have run a stop sign at some point. Right? There's signs on the road that have speed limits on them, yet many of us go over the speed limit. Why is that? Because we're choosing not to obey those rules or those sets of governance. Governance is typically put in place from rules and a practical perspective. But we forget that those rules are in place for human beings. And if human beings don't understand themselves, why do I feel the need to run a stop sign? Why do I feel the need to speed when I shouldn't? If they don't understand what's the driver behind that, they're not going to govern themselves accordingly. So emotional governance is about understanding why you do what you do, and then be able to choose the behavior instead of the behavior choosing you from a reactionary perspective.
Fascinating. So why do you think the emotional side of the family business system is so often overlooked amongst those who advise them?
Because it's sticky, thing. It's hard, right? They call it the soft issues, and I think it should be the hard issues because most advisors are afraid to ask the obvious emotional questions. Do you think your son Jimmy is the right person for that role? Are you treating your children equally and fairly? Right? And it takes a lot of courage from an advisor perspective to gently call their client up on behaviors that are not congruent with who they want to be. And a lot of advisors are typically, I always get this wrong, right brain and left brain. They're more technically driven. So they'll focus on solutions without understanding what's the cause of the problem. Like, all families know that they need to plan for succession and transition, yet many don't. All families know they need to have governance, yet many don't. And those that have governance have the belief that the governance will manage the dynamics. And it doesn't. So they set up boards of directors, family councils, hoping the governance will do the job. But if we have bad emotional governance between the individuals, those structures aren't as efficient as they could be.
So basically, you're talking about being a family financial therapist in many ways.
I wouldn't use the word therapist, so I'm not a therapist, right? So I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. Let's be really clear. I'm a coach. But I ask my clients the questions that they've been avoiding asking of themselves.
Interesting. So you talk about, a lot about the importance of creating kind of a safe space. In fact, you've got a patented, trademarked model around this for the individuals that you're coaching within the family ecosystem. What do you mean by this, and what are the benefits to, ensuring that there's a safe space built for these types of conversations?
So let me answer it this way. My personal purpose is to create a safer world. And the reason is I rarely felt emotionally safe as a child. And I believe it's one of our basic human needs to want to feel safe in our relationships, with our wealth, and in our environments. That doesn't just mean the physical environment, it means the emotional environment that we're in, i.e. family or relationships. The challenge is most of us don't know how to, because most of us come from this thing called family, where somewhere along the line, intentionally, but most of the times unintentionally, people were made to feel unsafe emotionally. Someone spoke the truth, they got ridiculed, they got judged, they got laughed at, they got made wrong. So people go, that's not safe to go there. I'm not going to speak up anymore. I'm not going to say what's on my mind. So we don't feel emotionally safe. So safe space is a process we take individuals and then families through to help them understand what it feels like to be emotionally safe with yourself. To be able to say, yeah, you know what, I was hurt by this and I'm going to make something up, abandonment issues or victim issues or control issues. And I understand where that comes from. But most importantly, I understand the impact my beliefs and behaviors have, not just on myself, but on those around me. So our process is about creating individual safety first, so you understand yourself, so you can govern your emotions, you can have emotional governance with yourself. That way, when someone looks at you a certain way, you choose the behavior instead of the behavior choosing you. It's not an automatic response. And then we move into familial safety, where individuals can share with themselves what's going through.
So you've written 5 books on various topics and spoken about the need for families to invest in a different yet equally important asset class called human capital. Some of our viewers, listeners may or may not be familiar with that term. Why is now a more critical time than ever for this investment of time into human capital? What would be your response to that?
Well, first of all, when we think of family wealth, it's made up of 3 components. It's got the financial capital, which you manage very well for families, the assets, the things, the stocks, the bonds, portfolios, private equity, all that sort of stuff. You got the human capital, which is individuals within the system. Then you have social capital, which is a collection of individuals, plus a collective brand and reputation. We are at a time where there's going to be an enormous amount of wealth transferred from one generation to the next, to human beings, by the way, right? And if we don't help those human beings understand what it means to have wealth, what it feels like to be wealthy, the challenges that come with it, that wealth will crush them. And it's the human beings that are the linchpin in this thing. You get good human beings that understand themselves and why they behave the way they do and emotionally govern themselves. They will be good decision makers in the financial capital side of things and good team members in the social capital side of things. Investing in human capital is the newest asset class that families should consider investing in, because you're equipping the future.
Reminds me of when I wrote my book, True Wealth, back in 2021. One of the lines in that book that's been repeated back to me many times, which caught me off guard a little bit at sometimes, but the phrase wealth tends to amplify personality. So can you give me an example of, or share a story kind of an example of what happens when families fail to invest in what you're calling human capital of their family businesses these days?
I have a family that I'm working with currently. Father started the business, very successful, 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And we created this tool called the money myth because of subconscious belief about money. And the daughter shared a story that when the family was not as wealthy as they are today, things were easy, life was fun. It was fun having a car, all that sort of stuff. And the more money dad started to make, she started to see father's friends' families start to implode. So at an early age, she made the conclusion that having a lot of money destroys families. That was one side. The other side was, it's an Australian family, so very male-dominated culture. The men look after the money. It's like the boys' club sort of thing. So she grew up with that. So now that she's in her 40s, and dad is in the position of transitioning, succeeding some of the responsibility and wealth to the next generation, who are in the 40s and 50s, she's got the stuff that money destroys families and money's a boys' club thing. How likely do you think it is for her to be involved in the conversations around money? Very slim, right? I had another family that I worked with in Canada. Dad was doing some significant trust planning and tax planning, so setting up trusts for the kids, large sums of money. And he said to me, I want you to spend some time with my daughter because I don't think she's really understanding it. She's pulling back. And we helped her uncover that her belief about money can't keep me safe and it brings trouble. So giving her a lot of money wasn't exactly the emotional or proper thing to do as a parent. Tax-wise, it made sense. So if we didn't understand why we behave the way we do with things like money, responsibility, power, leadership, it's going to crush us. And that comment is absolutely true. Money and wealth will magnify who people are. I always say, what do you get when you squeeze an orange? You get orange juice. When you squeeze a human being, you get what they're made of, emotionally and behaviorally.
Good points. So dividing the two groups you mainly work with, which is typically the founder, the current generation, and the second group, the next gens. What are the differences and similarities you see in these different groups when you're talking about how they feel regarding the transition succession process?
Well, I'll share some overarching themes first of all. So the older generation, typically in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, aren't as open to the idea or concept of coaching. Their belief is, if they had friends, if any of them did therapy or went to see a psychologist in the day, they would park 4 blocks away, make sure no one's looking before they duck into the doctor's office. And the current generation, those that are in the 50s, 40s, and 30s and younger, see the value of coaches. You have professional athletes, high performers, CEOs that have coaches. So they're open to the idea. They see coaching as it's going to make me better. It's going to enhance me. The old generation sees there's something wrong with me. I'm seeing the shrink. No, there's nothing wrong with you. You just want to improve yourself. You just want to understand yourself. You want to understand why you do what you do. So That's one piece. Mm-hmm. Both sides are not emotionally prepared to either let go or take over. So when we think about preparedness, the default thinking is it's the next generation being prepared. Well, they need to be prepared to receive, intellectually, educationally, and emotionally. The senior generation has to be prepared to emotionally let go. And, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of founders that say they're ready to let go. They've hired the lawyers, the accountants, they've got all the structures in place, and at the 11th hour, they don't execute. Mm-hmm. The reason is it's an emotional reason. And the reason is our greatest addiction as a human being is to our identity. And we collapse what we do and our roles as our identity. They are a part of who we are. They're not our identity.
Okay, everybody, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. So stay with us.
Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth Podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Welcome back, everybody. We're back with Franco Lombardo. We're getting right back into the interview. So what does your coaching or Veritage's coaching process look like, and how does it help families at these critical junctures, these either pain points or areas where they're struggling to kind of transition businesses or wealth successfully?
Well, it starts with really education. We start by interviewing all the participants, getting their lay of the land. What's their perspective on the current reality? What's going on right now? What's happening? And what's the desire for the future? So what's the desired reality? And we hold these interviews in private, so they're confidential. And as I tell all my clients, think of me as Geneva. I just listen. I don't judge. I don't criticize. I don't make wrong. I just go, that's interesting. Yep, that's good. Got that. And then we compile a very simple report that we present to the family 3/4 of the way into what we call an education day, which is a half-day session. So we bring them in, we introduce some of our concepts, like safe space, and then we create an opportunity for them to experience what that is, right? So I'll get them to go around and share something about themselves with the group. And the comments I hear over and over and over again from 50-year-olds are, you know what, brother or sister, I never knew that way. I never knew dad treated you that way. I never thought you felt that way. So what we do is we start to create a place of emotional safety where they can start to share some of them things. And what's fascinating is they move from judgment of each other to compassion and understanding of each other. And then 3/4 of the way, we introduce the report. And there's always a sort of gasp, because there's one thing to think about things in your mind, it's another thing to read it on paper. Right? And it's never something that catches them off guard. They already know this stuff. But now they're forced with the reality of it. So we talk about here's what we see, here's issues, here's how we can assist. The next evolution is one-on-one coaching. We coach each individual family member for 10 sessions over a 6-month period. So they can understand who they are, why they operate the way they operate, what their safe space is, what their beliefs are about money, and how that impacts all decision making. Once we've done that, then we move to the family meetings. And I do that because many times advisors run to family meetings way too quickly, and all of a sudden an elephant comes charging out of the closet into the room. If I'm gonna run a family meeting, I wanna know all the skeletons in the closet by name.
So how do you help families then bridge the gap and the inevitable silos that can kind of exist between the founder or the current gen and the next gen, so that their businesses and their capital and their wealth over time can transition very successfully? So just give me some examples, or some our viewers some examples of how do you transfer across that bridge to really bring people close together, family members.
So it starts by really helping in the one-on-one coaching, people understanding, founders and next gen. They all go through the same process, by the way. So they all learn a new language. Your safe space is this, your money myth is that, your gigs are this. So they learn a new language collectively as a group. So if I were to say, let's say, Dad, are your gigs showing up? So our gigs are how we behave when we're triggered. Human beings have very complicated behavioral responses, but I boil them down into 6. So there's the avoider, pretty self-explanatory. People pleaser, want to make everybody happy. The rescuer, they come in and save the day. There's the victim, the manipulator, and the right fighter, who fights to be right, got to be in control. So when they learn the language, Dad, you're being right fighter. Dad goes, oh, I get it. There's no judgment. There's no merry-go-round. It's just, you're being this. It's like you're wearing a white shirt. It takes the emotion out of it. And when individuals do the work on themselves, they can hold themselves accountable, have emotional governance within themselves to go, right, I'm acting out that way again. and to realize I see the impact that has on the people around me. So that's, we do the one-on-one work. And then when we bring it together in the family, we help them create what we call emotional governance documents. And the first piece is we help them come up with their guiding principles, which is this is how we agree to behave with each other as human beings. We forward through the complexity of shareholder and sibling and mom and dad. So I'm going to read you one as an example. And what makes us really unique is we don't just name it, we define it. And we come up with what's the action that shows you're living that guiding principle. So for example, here's a family. So expression of feelings. The definition is honestly saying what we feel, owning my feelings. It's okay and safe to do so, providing safe space, having the awareness that the initial feeling could be painful, owning the individual perspective. The action is curiosity and connection. So how do I know I'm expressing my feelings? When I'm curious and connecting. Now I know. So they can measure, I'm either applying the guiding principles or I'm not. See, a lot of families will have values that they have, integrity, transparency. But when you look at how they behave, they're not living them. Because they don't know what the action is that shows they're living integrity based on the definition of what integrity is for them.
So what have you observed then in this work? Because obviously you've dealt with a lot of, very interesting and successful families over time. What have you observed when people come into, a coaching process like yours, pre and post? Like how much transformation can there be, or is there normally pre and post?
Great question. Now it's I recently had the privilege of interviewing a family that I've worked with for a panel in Melbourne for a group called Franco Lombardo. And there was dad and two of the sibs up there. And what was fascinating thing was to see the level of vulnerability and openness and transparency about themselves and what they've gone through. Completely transform an audience. Right? So when families come in to see us, they're typically emotionally shut down, emotionally closed because they don't feel safe sharing themselves. So our process gives them permission to start to blossom and open up about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. So by the time we get to the family meetings, people can get really honest with each other. Not brutally honest, here's how I feel. They feel safe to share their thoughts and their feelings. And that's transformative.
What would you say the value of an external coach like yourself or an advisor like yourself can bring to a family when their focus is not the wealth, but the actual family dynamics and relationships?
I'll answer it this way. That particular founder that I interviewed on the panel, at first he says, Frank, I got to tell you, when my son brought me your proposal, I was flabbergasted by the fees. And he said, at first, I looked at it as an insurance policy. Yeah. Right? I'm investing X to protect Y. And he says, I got to tell you, the value we receive far exceeds the fee we pay. And then he says, it's no longer an insurance policy. I am designing my family's legacy.
Very extremely well said. So, if there's a founder or current generation member listening right now, watching this podcast, and they're feeling stuck or afraid or unsure as to how to ensure that their family business continues after they're gone, what would you say to them, Franco?
Just comment. Because it's like founders build successful businesses and accumulate massive wealth because they have to. They have to feed the family. That's where it starts. And I don't know a single founder that reaches, a certain stage of life where they've accumulated massive wealth saying, boy, I hope my wealth and my hard work destroys my family. And yet, this particular founder realized that if he didn't engage in this work, the money would destroy his kids. It's okay to have that fear. It's normal. And it's okay to ask for help to overcome it and to deal with it. You know, what was fascinating was, this particular client said, he says, I can't believe the amount of women that came up to me and talked to me. And he says, why do you think that is? I said, it's really simple. They see what's possible for their fathers.
So you would have observed a lot of people, and I guess the question I have of you is, so why, at the end of the day, why do people not engage with a professional coach like yourself?
Every one of us as human beings have pain. We have pain, right? And what happens is we believe that we don't want to feel that pain. So we build walls around it, right? We engage in certain relationships, we engage in certain behaviors, we accumulate wealth, we build businesses, all in the hopes to not feel the pain. But the reality is that pain is always there. And we create situations to go back and feel that pain. We are afraid of feeling our pain because we think it's something bad. Pain is just pain. Sadness is just sadness. Shame is just shame. And what happens is we're living in a society where we are more technologically connected with each other. And we live in the same society where we're more emotionally disconnected from ourselves and each other. So we don't give ourselves permission to feel our feelings because we're busy. We're busy working, making money, sexing, boozing, shopping, texting. Because we were conditioned that these feelings things aren't safe, because when I may have been 5 or 6, I expressed my feelings and I got shut down. So it didn't feel safe. So therefore we go, I don't want to feel that anymore. People are afraid of their own power. One of my favorite quotes, then, is from Marianne Williamson, and it's Mandela's inaugural speech. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We're terrified of really understanding who we truly are. And I just read this great quote in one of the best books I read on personal development, and it says, you will never find yourself in what you've built to define yourself. And we build these constructs around, I've got to behave a certain way, I've got to say a certain thing, I've got to have this kind of relationship, I've got to have this kind of business, all to avoid feeling the pain. All to avoid feeling feelings, period.
So with our few minutes that are remaining, what would be the 2 or 3 other things you'd like to kind of share with our audience today about what you've learned so far as, one of the top coaches in the world, from perspective of how to help families kind of work through their issues? Like, what would be the 2 or 3 things that just keep coming up and that you have observed that are working?
I think when we give ourselves permission to understand ourselves, we truly understand others. Right, so that's number one. And number 2 is vulnerability is a new power. Like, being vulnerable is, yes, I failed at that. Yes, I did that. And here's what I can do to remedy it. And owning it, taking accountability. We don't take enough accountability as human beings. So just, it's really about being honest with yourself. The truth agent came about being honest with yourself and with each other and with others. And being honest is, an example is, what, I'm a founder, I've got a very large business, and I am really scared. I don't know what to do. That's honesty.
So what brings you most satisfaction today in your professional role?
You know, being able to see my clients literally transform in front of my eyes. You know, I'm currently coaching a 14-year-old, and we had a session yesterday, and he realized that he's been so scared of trying new things because he's he's a little skinny and scrawny, and he's going to feel made fun of. So I said to him, "What if your new mantra became I am brave?" And he perked up. He like stood up and, yeah, I can do that. So when I see individuals, whether they're 14 or 80, make that kind of shift, that's cool.
Very insightful, Franco. Thank you very much for sharing with us and with our viewers. And I'll make sure that your information for Veritage is kind of at the tail end of this podcast. Thank you once again for your time and for your insights, and to everybody that's listened in today. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
That was Franco Lombardo, founder of Veritage, a global advisory firm that exclusively focuses on building relational governance, and also the founder of Influence, a gathering of the globe's highest net worth families represented in family businesses. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Franco, and I appreciate your continued support to the Smart Wealth podcast, produced by the great people at BNN Bloomberg and streamed live on iHeartRadio and your favorite streaming platforms, podcast platforms. Again, I'm Thane Stenner, and thanks for listening to the Smart Wealth podcast. Have a great day, everybody.
The comments and opinions expressed in this podcast are the results of work done by Stenner Wealth Partners Plus. They may differ from the opinion of Canaccord Genuity Corp. And should not be considered as representative of Canaccord's beliefs, opinions, or recommendations. All views expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The statements expressed herein are not intended to provide tax, legal, or financial advice, and under no circumstances should be construed as a solicitation to act as a securities broker or dealer in any jurisdiction. All views are intended for general circulation only and do not have any regard to the specific investment objectives, financial situation, or general needs of any particular person, organization, or institution. Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management is a division of Canaccord Genuity Corp. Member CIPF CIRO.